Okay, I've just come off a call with a client who said, Steve, great news. I've just raised 500 grand for my business through investment, a mixture of SEIS and non-EIS. So the non-EIS being institutional funding. Great news. But already in the back of my mind, I'm starting to think about the gross assets test for SEIS, which is £350,000. So how that works is basically you take a snapshot of the company immediately before the share issue, the SES share issue, and you say, are the gross assets, is the total more than £350,000? If it is, then that round doesn't count, or it's not qualifying SES share issue. Now, when you look at gross assets, what do we mean by that? We're basically looking at the top half of the balance sheet. So you think about all your assets. You just tot up all your assets. You say, cash in the bank being one of the main ones. What have we got in the cash that's sat there? What have you got in terms of inventory or stock? What have you got in terms of receivables, debtors, fixed assets? All the top half. You can't deduct liabilities. You just add up the top half of your balance sheet. And if it comes to more than £350,000, then you're stuffed. But what you can do here, which makes a lot of people get confused about, is say you've got £300,000 of cash already in the bank and you're about to raise £200,000. That £200,000 is excluded from that calculation if it's an advance for the impending transaction. So immediately before, don't count the £200,000 about to come in, but look at 300,000 and say, well, it's under 350, that's fine. So on that basis, okay. And I'm thinking about the scenario with this guy, and I'm like, right, okay, this client, it's £500,000. On the face of it, it's all right if it all comes in at the same time. If £200,000 of it is SES and £300,000 is EIS of non-SES, like I just mentioned that example. But consider this scenario, so it gets more complicated. Imagine if, and I'm going to check the facts on this particular case. Imagine if you've got £200,000 worth of non-SES comes in, say 2 weeks ago, cash in the bank, fine. Still gross assets 350, we're all fine. Then 2 weeks later, SES comes in, 200 grand. Again, I said before, that takes us over the 350s, it's 400,000, but we can exclude that advance, the £200,000, because it's just coming in. Okay, fine. Then a week later, the remaining £50,000 of SES comes in, and no cash has been spent at this point. So that £200,000 before that was eliminated is now, that was its one-off chance. It's now included. It's not a permanent elimination. It's just an advance for that particular share issue. So now we do have to include it. So we look back and we've got £400,000 in the bank. Therefore, that 50 grand that comes in now, the later 50 grand is excluded. It's not eligible for SES. So you've got to get the sequencing right, and that's the problem with SES and EIS for that matter. It's such a minefield of timings and just getting all the tests right and just looking across the different rules and saying, right, okay, have we triggered this rule? Or so you like checklist this, you have to go through everything. And that's where something like, the guy's completely oblivious. He's like thinking in his head, right, I raised 200 grand. It's under my 250 of my SES allowance, total investment. Therefore, I'm fine. He hasn't even thought about the £350 gross assets test. And these are the sorts of things you should need to sort of almost get a spreadsheet out and plot it out as a step plan of what's going to happen at each particular point. What's the snapshot of the gross assets at each share issue, and making sure that you don't breach from previous rounds. I've seen it a few times where it's come pretty close, especially where you're co-investing. So where you've got, as in this case, where you've got non-SES funds coming in at the same time from a bank or from a VC, or from like overseas investors who don't want the SEIS. You've got to stagger it to make sure that ideally probably the SES cash comes in first, so there's nothing else on the balance sheet or the gross assets are super low. But if you get chunks of money landing just before the SES funds, you're taking a snapshot of the balance sheet. You could be in a mess. You're either going to have to delay it, spend a chunk of that cash, get it down, and then do your SES funding. But these are sort of convoluted, chasing your tail kind of issues you do encounter with SES. So watch out for the gross assets test. Do the step-by-step plan. Make sure that you can exclude the advance you're about to put in as a funding round. But once it's in and you're on to your next round, you can't then exclude it again. It is part of the cash balance that's within the business. So where you've got sequencing of plans, make sure that you are plotting it out and making sure that you don't fall foul of this. So there you go, real life example. And I'm going to go and plot it through for this company now, and hopefully it works out fine. Alrighty, take care.